It's lovely to have you on our podcast. It's unusual. I have to be honest about why I sought after you. I don't know how many people live in Canada, but my sister-in-law has just gone to do a PhD there, so I thought it'd be fun to speak to some people about football in Canada.
That's fantastic. Where has she gone to do her PhD?
She's in Nova Scotia.
Nova Scotia.
Which I keep calling New Scotland to her because that's the only thing I can relate to, so that's fine.
Yeah.
But she's researching diamonds, so I'm going to keep that relationship alive, see how that goes in the future.
That's big. I'd like to start a relationship if that's possible. That'd be fantastic. Great. Yeah. So there's about 36 million in Canada, so there's a decent chance we'll bump into her.
Yeah. Okay. Well, should we just introduce ourselves quickly, Si? Si, do you want to kick off?
Yeah, so it's great to chat to you guys. We actually started out as a Leeds United podcast, mainly because we were just so inspired by the acquisition of Marcelo Bielsa as our manager. Before that, we had a cavalcade of really interesting managers like Paul Heckingbottom and David Hockaday, who even those that were sort of anoraks in the lower leagues of the UK, just who are these guys? Their collective IQ was probably close to 30. And so they didn't really inspire much confidence in Leeds fans. And then suddenly this enigmatic genius appeared and just sort of created this whole style and philosophy of football. So we actually started up a Leeds United podcast that linked football and philosophy, because both Stu and I are also we're really interested in philosophy as well, but inspired by Marcelo Bielsa. And this season is slightly different in that actually we've decided to branch out. So although I'm wearing my Leeds United top, actually the outsiders came out of that Leeds United podcast. So we're actually just talking about football more generally with teams in the UK, around the world, but also linking that with philosophy. So we've spoken to a number of professors of philosophy, some guys that are working in the game professionally for particularly we were just talking recently to a guy called Joost, who works for a number of clubs in Holland, professional clubs there, so like FC Twente and teams like that. He's a statistical philosopher, which I've never heard Stuart be so quiet when he was talking, which is hilarious. But yeah, no, it's sort of been a mad journey really, and it sort of led us to this point where actually talking about football and philosophy means we just get to meet really interesting folk. I mean, is there anything more we need to say there, Stuart?
No. I want to ask you a whole bunch of stuff about football in Canada, and we're called the outsiders, and without being disrespectful, football in Canada, it seems to us. I want to talk about cultural stuff, and I want to talk about a little bit about philosophy as well. A slight anathema when it comes to football, because we met when we started working together, and we commiserated over the state of Leeds United and stuff like that. But we kind of wanted to talk about football in a way that football isn't really spoken about. So we wanted to talk about, how does it affect culturally? How does it work? How does it work around the world? How does it work as a kind of a currency? How does it work as a communication? And we're mad about philosophy, so we were interested in the great philosophers who just by chance were interested in football as well. So my personal, for example, my personal favorite philosopher is Camus, and he was a goalkeeper as well, and so when you read a lot of stuff about existentialism and absurdism and the rest of it, he made like direct corollaries between, how to live your life, the point of life, and the inevitability of failure in football and stuff like that. So we tried to attach the two together. One thing I'm absolutely fascinated to talk to you about is your impressions of English people and football. Because I've been listening to your previous podcasts, and I can't help but when listening to Liverpudlians talk about football, and I'm not going to I won't insult anyone, but it's really interesting because the kind of conversation we're having, and if I'm being completely honest, people kind of like lash out against, is intellectualizing football and try to make it again a kind of the discourse of something a bit more than kind of nasty, kind of like not like the 9 cliches that get passed around.
Tribalism.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
And it's interesting because I was listening to the one you did with the Anfield rap, and 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 that was interesting in as much as it becomes kind of an echo chamber of if you go around every single club in this country, they have like their own unofficial podcast,
Yeah.
and it turns into you just replace the name of the team with the same adages and the same anecdotes and the rest of it, and it goes,
Yeah.
oh yeah, well the thing is my family are mad about it, and and no one else understands, and we want that. And Leeds United are an interesting team. What's your understanding of Leeds United and their heritage? Do you follow them in any way, shape, or form?
Definitely. I had a coach who was from the area just outside Leeds. I think it's Hemsworth Town it's called. I believe, if that's correct, or if I'm totally making that up, I don't know, but I'm pretty sure that's where it was. So I used to watch all the VHS tapes. I'm dating myself now as an older man, of the Revy sides, and the Giles and Bremner and Hunter, and like what a team that was. And I remember watching one, like the tape started off, it was like the history of Leeds United up to like 1988 at the time or something like that. And there's one where they make like 36 passes in a row. So it's like tiki-taka pre the Barca days, and they're just, the crowd's doing the olays, and I'm just like this young Canadian kid thinking, what the hell am I? This is brilliant.
I think that might be the famous game against Southampton where they were just tripping it over the players and playing it back and forward, and
on the back, little things and stuff. And it was just like, what a show. Like, so like it's a massive club. So the managers you mentioned, like I wouldn't say I sat there and tried to follow them, but I heard the names and I was like, what are these guys doing at a club like that? It was a sleeping giant again for a long period of time. So I think I know quite a bit about them. It's a big time club for sure. And I'm happy
I'll jump on you too, Steve, because Steve, this is perfect where Steve jumped in on like his knowledge, and the more knowledgeable people who've followed this game for a long time here will know of the Bremners and the Hunters and all this stuff. But funnily enough, I mean, I know the Man Cities of the world, and the plastic culture, whatever you guys call it over there. It's almost leads in that fashion, because in Canada, we've now had like this television revival where we get every game in the world anytime we want live. So Leeds are unknown to this new generation because they were down for so long.
They've had 16 years away from,
Exactly. And now that they've popped up again with this Bielsa, it's like so it's almost like you see more Leeds interest than as like, because it's generation. You guys saw Chelsea kits a while back. You see City kits now, and now it's almost like Leeds are this new flavor that almost like popped up out of nowhere to this new generation. So that's an interesting take on what I see anyway around here.
So Leeds hitting the news in Canada.
Yeah, big time. I mean, Bielsa is like, how do you not follow that guy? Like, let's be honest. He's a mad genius. He's a friggin' character. He's eating sunflower seeds on a bucket on the side of the field. Like, it's just fascinating to watch someone like that, right? But he knows his stuff, right? Like, he's producing a style of football. I think it suits Leeds well as like, if you go with their culture, what they want to see. Like, I think that's in line with them.
Can I ask you guys, is Bielsa turning this around and getting a lot of interest from you guys more now? Because we look at like Newcastle, for example, as they always say, we want to play attacking football. We don't care if we lose 5-4 as long as we're attacking. Is Leeds the same thing? Like, do you guys really want this manager that's attacking, and kind of, you'd rather lose a couple games here and there but play attractive stuff? Is that how it is?
What's interesting about Leeds and Leeds fans is I think and I'm sure it's the same with most football clubs, were you to ask 16 Leeds fans about what our identity is as a footballing side, particularly our footballing philosophy, you'd get 25 opinions. And we've got the traditional history of having some really good footballers, but during that early tiki-taka, as you were saying, under Reevy, that's also where we gained the title Dirty Leeds. Because actually there were a bunch of nutcases playing for us who and they sort of hunted in packs. So if somebody tried giving one player a kicking, then suddenly they'd have 11, including our goalkeeper, giving it back. And so there's this element. I think the one thing I would say that Leeds is a working class city on the whole. It's starting to become more gentrified, but actually on the whole it's working class, and it's still got very strong working class roots, and Leeds United has that. So there's hard work. So a player can be I think Stuart Dallas for me epitomizes Bielsa's Leeds, but also what Leeds fans are looking for, because Dallas in every single way, he's not the fastest player. He's not the most skillful. He's not the best at tackling. He's not the best at heading. But you just see this like incredible work ethic. And because he fits in with Bielsa's system, Leeds fans have taken to him. But there are other players that we've had before who undoubtedly have been incredibly skillful. But if we get that slight hint, that sense that they're not working hard, then it's like we sort of take a step back. But then that's not just stuck to Leeds. Because I think if you look at some other lots of other sides, I don't know whether it's a UK thing, like, or whether it's like in the British game that's a sort of an expectation that you need to run lots, or not. But I don't know. It's something that definitely for me as a Leeds fan, I like to see that. I like to see a player that's like, you know, absolutely panting when they come off the pitch. Like I can be excoriating towards Patrick Bamford, our striker, and his efficiency, but when he does the interviews afterwards, it's hilarious because first of all, he went to a public school. So he's like, oh yeah, it was an absolute war of attrition. It was absolutely, you know. But like you can see that he's already got like a body fat of 5%. It's like reduced over the game to about 3.5. He's sort of he's gone. But inside, I'm like, yes, that's what I want from my guy who's earning £35,000 a week. Yeah. But I don't know. I mean, in terms of the Canadian game, is that what in terms of for the leagues that you've been a part of? So I know obviously the team that you were part of initially have folded now, but they've been replaced by another side as well. Is that something that sort of fits with your game, or is it more you look towards the sort of the technical side of things?
I think for us, it's heavily British influenced here. Heavily. Like Mark could speak to it. The two of us, it was almost like every coach we had growing up was a British coach. So, you know, the whole, you know, we are part of the monarchy and all the rest of it. So it's heavily influenced. So that attitude has been instilled. And then, to be honest, to draw some parallels, to try and sound more philosophical or philosophy type than I am, because you scare the crap out of me when you start talking about your education and stuff. I'm like, you got the wrong guys here. But hockey would be the same. Canadians like will have a superstar, and if he's just fanning about and stuff, they're not gonna warm to him. They want their superstars to block a shot and get hit in the face with a puck and lose 8 teeth. And that's when they gain respect for him, even if he gets you 200 points a season. So it is very similar in that respect. Like, I don't know why I can't speak and say philosophical, but philosophically, there's a lot of parallels there.
Yeah, big time. And there's one that I always talk about because we're both youth coaches as well, and we coach in the city. And there's one, and I don't know if the name's going to ring me, but was it Alex Nyarko when a supporter ran on the pitch and took his shirt off and tried to take his off because he wasn't working hard enough? And that always resonated me with the British culture of like, you know what? This supporter ran on the field. He was 280 pounds and holding a meat pie still. But he's like, give me the shirt because I'm going to run myself into the ground more than you are. And that always stuck with me. I'm like, you know what? Like, I like when Jamie Carragher slides across and kicks it into the stands to save a goal. And like, you know, the Spanish type are saying, well, he should have maybe slid, kept it in play and made a nice, but I'm like, he just took the guy's legs out, put it in rosette and on you go. We're defending a throw. Like, I mean, it's different now, but I like it. And probably because we've been influenced. And like Steve said, if you didn't have a British accent in Canada from 1980 to 1995, you didn't have a job.
No one listened to you. No one listened to you. Even if you're a Brazilian.
Yeah, like Stuart and I, we play football at a pub level. So like playing for the horse.
I play slightly below pub level.
Yeah. It's sort of, it's hilarious the things that get you accolades. So you're playing on these, I mean, what can only be described as bogs. You know, at a 45-degree angle, and you can have a really skillful player that will take it round 4 or 5 players, and it's sort of like, oh, that was all right. But you have an absolute meathead at the back who's got a vocabulary of about 6 words, but falls through about 4 players and heads the ball about 30 yards. And the loudest sort of screams of sort of like this raw primal thing comes through. And I guess maybe there's an element in and that's wherever you are in the country, that's sort of the same thing. It's starting to change a little bit more. I've played both in the south and the north. Like England is really regional. And so in the south, there's a little bit more of the sort of the technical side coming through, but still, particularly in traditional working class areas, if you can't put a tackle in, if you can't, smash a header, although that looks like that's going to be, in the next 20 years, I think heading's probably going to be banned with all the researchers going through, and probably a good thing actually. But they're the things that get the loud cheers. And we once invited you mentioned about Brazil. We had a Brazilian lad who played at sort of the 10 role for us, but again, a local sort of pub side. I mean, he did not like the weather. He did not like, but he didn't like our style of football because he'd skill it past 2 or 3 players, lose it, and think he was a hero. When everybody else was thinking, what are you doing? And he didn't last that long before he actually went back to Brazil again. But it's one of those things, isn't it? And I guess that sort of then filters through to our appreciation of the game. And that's why I think, if you're a Leeds fan, you want to see a player that's willing to go through hell or high water.
All of that being said, we've done some podcasts in the past where we've spoken about some quite abstract notions. Is that enough? Where we talk about some quite abstract notions. So what is it to be a big club? So we look at all the variables and all the dynamics behind what it is to be a big club. And you spoke about Newcastle earlier. I could talk about a few: Newcastle, Sunderland, Leeds United. I think there's several that are kind of maybe through a kind of group kind of failure where they become so tribal and they become so bed into that football is everyone's life in that city. Leeds is definitely one of those cities. So as much as we can say that generalization that, oh yeah, we love it now and we love the skill and we love the fact is if you watch Twitter and type in hashtag LUFC before and after a match, what you'll see is lynching mobs saying, if anybody says anything against Leeds United, I will lynch you from the nearest lamppost. And then 30 seconds after the final whistle, win, lose or draw, we want to lynch half of our own squad. And we want to go, he was terrible, get him out. We need someone else in. There's this bloke who plays in the 2nd division in Germany. He should come in and all that kind of stuff. So there's a healthy schizophrenia around Leeds United where, and actually, you know what's interesting is that I think we went on a streak of winning in the Championship. We won a kind of 8 in a row, and then we drew to a team that was in the bottom 5, and it started going around on Twitter like hashtag Bielsa out, and it was, and that's what they're like. That's what it's like. And I'm not turning on us, but it's just a fact of who we are. Like there's a healthy kind of like cynicism, schizophrenia, and just mania about Leeds United and Newcastle. You referenced Newcastle earlier, but we often, we were in the third tier of English football, and there's 30,000 people turning up to watch absolute shite. It was terrible. It was awful. Terrible players, mercenaries, just there for the pay packet and to wear the badge, and managers who you forgot then what the name was, but that's the nature of kind of English football. So can we talk a little bit about the season this year? You say that have you been watching a lot of British football this year?
Oh yeah, 100%.
Who has? Can we just do one of these tedious kind of podcast kind of things where we go? Who has surprised you? Who has wowed you, and who has underwhelmed you?
Wow.
I'll kick it off right away. Where the typical surprise, I don't want to jump on the West Ham or, what I mean? That's just it's too easy. But for me, it's when Southampton started the season and they built with that German coach and they got over that 9 whatever last year, and they were flying up and they were healthy and they were doing really well. They surprised, but I'm not even going to say they surprised me doing well. They've surprised me how far they've fallen again, where I'm like, is this German guy? I don't even want to try his last name, but Hasselhüttl or whatever. I mean, is he not good enough at this point? For me, it's like I had him as pegged. Wow, this guy's going to bring him up. They were up, but where they are now, I mean, I just find with their players, with the manager, I think they should be better.
Right.
You destroyed me, Mark. Like now I feel like you destroyed my answer as being too easy. I have to say West Ham. I'm gonna say it still anyway because I'm not smart enough to come up with another example in that amount of time. But I really am, and in a weird way, I'm actually happy for David Moyes. I don't know why I hated him at United, and I do support Liverpool, so I wasn't a big fan at Everton. But I don't know, in a way, like I actually think this is a weird one for you. You guys can like go into my mind and maybe tell me why I'm so weird, but I actually think there's almost like a reverse British racism that's begun to happen now, where like not you, like just anywhere, even in Canada, because we said there was all these British coaches for so long, and now it's almost spun so far the other way that if you are good in British, it's almost like, well, we can't give you a chance. And it even happens here in Ottawa with these local coaching that Mark said, and like a David Moyes, or like there's a lot of good managers there. Eddie Howe, how's he out of work? Like, so I see guys like that, and I think, well, because their name's not Spanish, that now they can't coach all of a sudden. Like, they can't.
Actually, I think I have a fairly good explanation for that. It's because we have a pool again of mercenary managers, your Pardew's, your Allardyce's.
Yeah.
And what happens is there's this like kind of toxic kind of leeching from them onto other British managers. So it turns into like David Moyes on a bad run is boring, he's conservative, he's not enigmatic, etc., etc. And he just turns into another Pardew. He just turns into another Allardyce. And all it will take for him to be sacked, if I'm being honest, is it's 5 or 6 matches where it doesn't come together and they fall 5 places down the table, and then people will start to frown and say, well, and they'll lose all kind of perspective about 100%. Where they should be achieving and stuff like that. So
I actually have a question for you guys. It's perfect you support Leeds, because I've been doing this on our show, so I know you may have listened to 1 or 2, and it's the worst, but I do it in defense of this reverse British racism. I think, what's the difference between Bielsa and Roy Evans?
Well, actually, we made a comparison. Well, no, let Si go.
Like it. Anyway, I'll let you answer my ignorant question, and then I can maybe answer too.
Bielsa's from Argentina.
Yeah. Brilliant. Absolutely brilliant. I'm so happy. I only say that as like, Roy Evans played this swashbuckling style and lost and never won a trophy. And, Bielsa hasn't either. I know he won the first division. Don't get me wrong. Bielsa's, he is amazing. I totally think he is. But it's kind of like, are we overinflating him as opposed to some of these others?
I'm a big, this sort of links to our philosophical sort of outlook as well. So Bielsa for me is the ultimate pragmatist. So when you look at Bielsa, I think the difference between him and Roy Evans is seen in a number of different ways. Bielsa in his entire career, not just with Leeds, he's an ideologue. So he is so wedded to one specific style. It's actually to his cost. And actually, Ronaldo will never play for Bielsa because Bielsa will be angry that he won't track back. Messi 100%. Will never play for Bielsa, apart from when he played for him for Argentina. But for me, the difference is if Roy Evans was sacked from a job, unlike Bielsa, he wouldn't go to a monastery for 6 months and read. I would love for him to have done that.
That'd be hilarious.
But actually, Bielsa, he's got that. He's also got like the aura around him. But what I think with Bielsa in particular is that he's a coach, first and foremost. Yes. And so where the trophies haven't necessarily come, I think that's because actually you don't get a trophy for taking a bang average player and turning them into Premiership material. So it's quite Leeds centric because we're Leeds fans, but it's if I think about our left back Alioski, he would be equally as effective in the 3rd division of North Macedonia. I personally think than as he is in the Premiership. Stuart Dallas, he was a journeyman player. I mentioned him before. He's transformed Calvin Phillips into an English international. Liam Cooper, who we got from Chesterfield, he's turned him into a Premiership defender. I think you don't get a trophy for that, but what he's enabled Leeds to do, I think any other manager in the Premiership at the moment with that Leeds squad would be second from bottom.
I agree. So I'm actually wholeheartedly in agreement with you. It was more the point about with the British, but I love what you got into. Like, I would love to speak a little more about philosophy, and I'm actually desperate, and I want to let you off the hook. Like, you can say Canada soccer's piss, and we're not gonna get upset. Like, you can give it right to us, and I'd love to get into that if you have questions. But yeah, I think that's why. How do you not love someone like Bielsa, who's so entrenched in what he is? And you say he went to a monastery. He was a teacher, right? Was he not? And that's his background in teaching. And like, how do you not respect someone like that? I would go to war with someone like that, right? So you can't help but love him. He's just like unbelievable.
I think a part of it as well.
Sorry, he's also autistic, which
100%.
which is like, for me, is fascinating, because it's like he's so oblivious in certain areas of like what life is about and what happens, but in other areas he's almost like this sort of genius voice that cuts through some of the social nonsense that like, I don't know about in Canada, but like football in the UK is entertainment, and that's why Mourinho is, I think, still gets jobs in the Premiership, because actually, like, as a chairman, you're selling more shirts, you're getting more coverage, you're getting all those things. You've got Mourinho, whereas Bielsa sort of, he cuts through that. He's got this weird benign sort of hug that he gives managers that he respects. If he smashes a team 7-0, he has like 30 seconds where he's like awkwardly holding the managers. COVID as well, like he's holding them and sort of saying to them, "You deserve to win." But yeah.
Oh, yeah, I was just going to say the thing that's really helped us out when we've been talking about it is that actually, when all said and done, as you can probably tell, Sai is the football brains of this operation. I'm just the enigmatic kind of like sidekick, but the thing that really pleases me about Bielsa is that he's helped fans like me talk about football in a different way. So I think he educates the players. When you see myriad of things that he did. He made them go litter picking down the M1, which is the busiest motorway that stripes from the south to the north of England. Incredibly dangerous. But he took players that are on 30 grand a week and said, "I need you to go and pick up crisp packets from the side of the M1." And I'm sure, after our analysis, but I'm sure during, he kind of told them why, and he told them the reasons why that was important. And he told them that they did 2 hours worth of work, which is the equivalent of what a Leeds fan would have to do in order to afford a ticket. And so there's something about educating the whole person. And I imagine that people will leave. You're talking about Alioski. I think he's just signed a contract to go and join Galatasaray, actually, at the end of this season. Wow. I think he will leave with a heavy heart, but I don't think it will be because he'll be missing his wages or missing. I think he'll miss Leeds. And I think he'll miss Bielsa, because I think he's made him into something that he never thought he could be. Yeah. Half of the Leeds squad, to be completely honest, shouldn't really be playing in the Premiership. That's kind of a fact. And we've got 19, 20, 21-year-old kids that are turning out every single week, alongside people like Rafinha, and it's unusual. And I think possibly the only real prospective downfall, and this is a good point of discussion, might be that Leeds need to start spending big and bringing big names in order to compete, which directly kind of like is antithetical to what Bielsa is all about. And I've often found his presence in football really puzzling. His family are all kind of aristocratic kind of politicians, and he's quite obviously a socialist, an outspoken socialist, and yet he deals with millions of pounds on a weekly basis of wages, and he can't honestly look out upon a football squad in 21st century football and go, yeah, this is a meritocracy, this is how life should work. I'm sure he kind of compartmentalizes it to a point of where he thinks, well, this is just my job of work and I need to go about doing it. But I find him incredible. And we interviewed a guy that wrote the first biography of him in English, and the stories he told us about when he used to play in and when he was a player, his friend's house, the roof fell in. So he used his wages to build a roof on his friend's house. That was his wages. When he came to Leeds and he took the £8 million, he hired this huge raft of people to help him coach the team and gave all the money away. And it's just so anti everything to do with football. And, I really don't envy other teams. I don't envy other teams' players. When we've got a guy who works with us on the podcast called Jim, who's an Arsenal supporter, and I can't even talk about Aubameyang without wanting to retch. And he's kind of like mirror glazed Lamborghini going through the high street of London. Yeah. It's just sickening, and I'd hate for Leeds to be like that. It's completely ruined football for me in some ways. It's completely ruined what I expect of players and managers and the rest of it.
And that's clearly a problem you have with the Canadian Football League, isn't it? It's just, it must be awash with cash.
It's just, there's so much money. It's like we're drowning in it over here.
Yeah, that's why.
Go ahead, Mark.
That's why. Believe it or not, because we have, I don't know if you guys don't have it. It's a app. It's called The Zone. It gives us all all the games for everything. But I'll tell you what, you talk to a lot of Canadians now, even the average Canadian, because of what you were mentioning with, the out of control wages and then this and 100 million for, I'll tell you, the Championship and League One are getting more viewers here in Canada than you can shake a stick at. You talk to anybody and they're like, you know what, there's this, like today, I was watching Portsmouth Sunderland ahead of Juve Porto, because you know what, like I'm like, these are two teams, they're in the top six, they're battling for top six, they're killing each other for the, they're not leaving, they're playing for their next contract. And that's, I'm going to bridge that into the MLS in North America and the CPL. We have athletic people. You're not seeing technique. You're not seeing all this, beautiful stuff. What you're seeing is a 24-year-old or a 28-year-old with 2 kids and a wife that needs a contract. And he'll run through the stadium. He'll run through a pregnant lady holding a bird to get to the ball for a throw. He doesn't care. And that, to me, is kind of what I want to, my mentality is switching to. And I like to watch the Scottish Premiership too, in some ways too, Hearts, Hibs, those kind of games. Those are fantastic.
Well done. That's a different kind of football.
It is a different kind. My family's from Glasgow. They all look like this, and so it's just a totally other. Like you don't even want to go there. I wanted to say, like, to your point, Mark, about the athleticism and stuff like that. If we look at maybe culturally and the whole philosophy behind things, you were saying how, like, British, it's like that guy who yells and heads the ball 30 yards and whatnot. I think based on what Canada is and how it became, it's like it is a true melting pot. And I think in football, that's always hurt us. The fact that we haven't had that identity or culture, and it's so sparse to get from BC to New Scotland, where you said your sister is, or Nova Scotia, whatever. It's so far. And really, that's like, you could have entirely different styles in these places. It really, what it's come down to, and it was an American problem for a long time that I hate to say it, is actually starting to improve. The quality of players that the US are producing now painfully is impressive. Anyways, long-winded answer is we tend to pick athletic athletes, and you can't really say, how do Canadians play? It's a massive issue we have. Now we have a generation here, all of a sudden we're terming as like these are the ones that are our chance. So there's an Alphonso Davies at Bayern Munich, Jonathan David at Lille. There's a bunch of kid at Wolves. There's a bunch of different ones that are at a level where we could actually get to a World Cup, not just because we might host it. But the fact that we don't have that identity, where, you just nailed, like, an Englishman, and we can talk about what a Spaniard would be like. We could say, Italians and the Catenaccio and why that came about, because, invasions in the past and stuff like that. So, and then what you were saying about Bielsa, I feel like I'm taking over the podcast, and I apologize. The whole socialist piece to it, like socialism and that communist thing, changed the game of football as well. That collective behavior of, like Mark's Ukrainian Lobanovsky style of everybody's just a piece and a cog and interchangeable. And you see a guy like Klopp or a Bielsa who want that style, and can they adapt at those higher levels? And it's, to me, that stuff's fascinating. So anyways, just to beat my dead horse, Canada has that issue of, what are we? And we struggle with that as a football nation. Whereas you go hockey, you know exactly what it is. Yeah. And it's very easy to pinpoint.
Do you think that's like, because I guess you've got a different issue around the grassroots level, because like grassroots football here in the UK is like, it's what, if you play something on a Sunday or a Saturday, it is football. Rugby is still a fraction of what football is in terms of at the grassroots level. And so I've got, my theory is that the grassroots sort of feeds in to the higher levels, and money is taking it slightly further away from that. But actually in the UK still, that grassroots game is still so important, so strong. Whereas like, I guess for you guys, a grassroots game on one side of the country could feel very different to a grassroots game on the other.
Oh yeah.
100%.
Yeah, it's brutal. Like, not only is it different grassroots, different sports, different seasons, different this, that, and the other, the weather too. Now we have indoor facilities. I mean, similar to what Iceland have, where there's a big dome over a turf field and that kind of thing. And you're pricing out half your players because you're paying, I mean, just youth sports here for a 9-year-old, you're paying over $2,000-3,000 a year just to play and kick a ball at that point. I mean, so we've talked about this on our podcast a million times. We've even started a fund with our podcast to try and help like the kids in the inner city try and play. But it's like you're pricing out 85% of your kids to begin with. And then in that last 15, they're playing hockey over the winter. So you're only getting the hockey kids over the summer. So then you can't mesh anything together. Nothing really, everyone's at all these different levels all the time. And it's just a juggling act. So
and who do you want in soccer? Let's be honest, in football, who do you want to play? You want the working class. You want a Messi. You want that poor kid. You want the Alphonso Davies, who's from a refugee camp. And now hockey is the same price as soccer in Canada, football. Like, that blows my mind. Growing up, it was buy a pair of shin pads and you're good to go. And that's what helped the sport grow here. And the fact that it's at that same level is mind boggling.
Yeah, that's insane. Like, because I complain when I've got to pay a $5 for playing football on a Saturday. Yeah. And I'm the one that the manager's chasing around for the subs. It's like, that's just absolutely insane. Like the sort of the cost of it. And then on top of that, we play five-a-side as well, don't we? In the evenings, and that's fine. I guess the weather is quite a big one. Again, we've got to stop complaining about the weather. It's like, it's a bit rainy. It's like, we're all right, I think.
We're all right, yeah.
Yeah.
So in terms of, sorry, can I ask you just a question? I was fascinated about because you guys are obviously quite closely associated with the team that folded in Ottawa. I just want to find out a little bit more about that in terms of like how that hit you guys like personally, because like we had a real existential crisis as Leeds fans when just before Satan himself and Ken Bates bought our club. There was a bunch of fans that actually went to create almost like a rival team called Leeds City, because we actually thought our team would fold. And like, I genuinely I didn't know what to do.
We were hours away from not having a club. I mean, when you think about Leeds United in that respect, the fact that not very many years ago, we were hours, days away from not being a club anymore, going to a complete administration and dissolution. And now, the 49ers have gone and bought 10% of us, and it's incredible, really. It's incredible.
Well, I'll tell you what, we actually mentioned this on our podcast a couple of weeks ago, where soccer in our country, specifically even Ottawa, from the time I was born and Steve was born, how many have filtered through? We've had the Intrepid, they're done. Capital City, done. Fury, done. I mean, there's no connection to anything. You can't, and nothing's around long enough to get a connection to, because everything is so independent that it just doesn't work. And now it finally may work here, like knock on wood, because we've got Atletico Madrid. I don't know if you know much about the new team in Ottawa, but Atletico Madrid has backed a team and started it in Ottawa now. I mean, we've got billions of dollars over there, but I mean, they could pull the plug any second too. So, I mean, what are we getting? That's why you'll find a lot of Canadians have teams in Europe or in South America or everywhere else. And our local teams, like in the Canadian Premier League right now, if you're bored on a Sunday, or if you have nothing to do, or your kids, you're going to bring your kid to a game. Yeah, let's go to a game, whatever. But you're not sitting there like, Jesus, they lost it. You leave and you're like, all right, let's get a donut. It's like, whatever. I'm sweating in front of the TV when Rangers play, or Man United or whatever. Even the national team. I love the national team. You'll get a lot of it, but local clubs, nah.
To answer your question though, for us personally, like in this respect, Mark's answer is bang on. It's tough to latch on for us personally, because we were involved in the club. This one did sting for sure. We coached in the club, and there was players in the first team that had come through from what we did. So you have a sense of pride, of course, doing that. And so that one stung. But I think to your point too, Mark, it stung a little less because you almost expect it at a certain point. You're so scarred from it. You just think, well, it's going to come eventually, which is part and parcel to our problem over here with that establishing of a culture. When you lose it, you lose a bit of that culture.
And the lack of, sorry,
just to carry on from that, sorry. How have you guys, as I understand it, because I have connections in Canada now.
Yeah, that's right.
You are Canadian now.
Your lockdown is no more. You're kind of pretty much free to go and come and go as you please.
No, the country's so big that
Oh,
You've
okay,
got
it's different.
pockets that are still completely locked down. You've got pockets that are running in fields, hugging each other. It's you don't know what's
That's what
going
we do.
on.
That's what we do. We
So
even though we're tightly locked down, we still have the field hugs. So
right outside the cottage is what I picture.
yeah.
Well, the field hugs are highly underrated, I think. Yeah.
I'm not allowed in
so
his village. I'm not allowed in his village.
No,
There's
no,
people
no. We don't
outside with
accept people
rifles.
like
They
him.
see the riffraff turn up and fire into the air, and I'm.
So has COVID well and truly put the kibosh on like a lot of
Yeah,
stuff that's getting off the ground?
Yeah, we've like the Canadian Premier League's only been, had its one season.
Mm-hmm.
COVID hit for the second season, and they had a little month-long tournament. Mm-hmm. This was in the summer,
right?
And since then,
on an island, Mark, quite literally on an island, on Prince Edward Island, they put them all. They quarantined them and put them on that island and played the tournament. Yeah. And so Prince Edward Island is like there's like 8,000 people on the island, for God's sake. Like, it's friggin' small.
Yeah. No,
it's Prince Edward Island.
It's near New Scotland, Nova Scotia.
Really?
Yeah,
it's in the East Coast.
I thought that rang a bell.
Yeah. Your sister can definitely visit P. Yeah, like COVID is like non-existent over there either, so it's pretty good.
Yeah. Well, no, because she's sending me pictures of, like, I never thought I'd be envious of someone eating a burger, in a burger place. And I'm looking at these pictures, and she's walking down the street, and there's other people walking down the street, and I'm thinking, shit, that looks like heaven. But but I didn't realize that it was different across the country. I didn't realize that it was different
by the provinces. So each one of our provinces has its different governing rules and whatever.
And is that just dependent on how close you are to America, or?
You know what it should be.
Pretty much, yeah.
We're gonna build Trump's wall for him to keep them out from the states.
Yeah.
Jesus.
Yeah.
How much American football do you? I don't mean American football. I mean American soccer. Do you watch? Is that growing? Because one of the things that we talk about sometimes is the kind of why isn't China got a better team? Why hasn't America got a better team? Something I never understand.
Well, the Americans are like, the MLS growth is pretty good. It's pretty big. The Americans are, like Steve mentioned earlier, they're pumping out some world-class players now with McKinney at Juventus and like Pulisic and all, and like there's a whole bunch of young ones. But see, that to me, I'm going to counter my own argument, where these are the guys that leave at 14 and go to Europe. Yeah. They're not churned through the MLS. The MLS is, I think, probably at its peak, where you're getting like the workman style kind of, League One, bottom championship type equivalent. And that's what it is. And you know what? It gives young players sometimes the potential to play a bit and then go. But it's like, to answer your question of how big is it, do we watch it? Like, I love it. Yeah. I love it because we have 3 teams in Canada in the American, in the MLS, and 2 of them are, a couple hours drive away from us, which in Canada is like, it's actually super close. If you can get somewhere in 5-hour drive, it's like your neighbor. So, so I mean, we know, and like, there's a lot of young Canadians that come out of there, and it's a good league. It's well organized. It's well run. The money's there.
You know what, Mark? I gotta argue with you. Let's just have some controversy here, okay?
Because
I'm gonna take not offense. I'm gonna say you're slightly wrong with one of your points, and Sai nailed it earlier about the grassroots. The MLS, because it's established, and again, I have to give it to the Americans as much as it pains me. It's well established, and those kids that have come through now, you're right that they are leaving, but they're all starting in MLS academies now. Like, their youth and grassroots, they're starting there. And yeah, you're right, Mark. They don't go into the league. It's very athletic still, and then the best ones, the Pulisic's, leave. But their base now is there. Like, those kids may have been lost to basketball or football or baseball in the States before. Like, just the fact that it's there and it's this established whatever it is, it's given them that base to bring those kids through.
I'll agree with you, but remember when Ibrahimovic moved, we're going to go back to the money point. When he was at the Galaxy, remember this, Steve? He was at the Galaxy and he wanted his kid to play in the academy, LA Galaxy Academy. They charged Ibrahimovic $6,000 for the season. That's how much it costs to play in an MLS academy for a child. I mean,
I want to know who said that to Zlatan, because he must be like, who has the guts to
Imagine.
walk up to Zlatan and ask for $6,000 to put his kid in
And
a
yeah,
academy?
and that's the problem here. I don't know if what it's like over there with youth sports and everything, but it's become professionalized here, and it's just millions of
I
dollars.
think
No. It's
for
it's
me,
basically a complete meritocracy here. It's they will take children as early as possible for completely free. They will
Yeah.
pay for everything. They will take them out of school. They'll give them tutors, everything.
Wow.
it's interesting actually, because our opinions over here, particularly of the US, particularly with mine, it's almost like, so it's capitalism on speed,
Yeah,
which whereas like in the UK, it's capitalism with your toe dipped in the water. And so there's we're all capitalists, but there's something underneath that the little socialist whispers in our ear every so often and reminds us that we've got the National Health Service, for example, and things like that. And so and so football actually is that interesting one, because it's capitalist, but it's also not. So it's capitalist in that if you're poor, being really good at football is your best way to become a millionaire. But also 0.02% actually get to that point.
exactly.
For me, like, it's really interesting. When I think of the MLS, I still see it as a retirement home for footballers.
Oh yeah. You'll see top class players in their early 40s. Absolutely. Yeah.
Well, that's
I think
them
Beckham
doing
still
it to
plays every
themselves.
so often.
Yeah, that's the league doing it to themselves. I mean, they can easily stop that because the league is in charge of transfers. It's not clubs. So a club can't go out and buy somebody without the league approving it. So you are bought by the MLS or sold, like, and the MLS gets the money and a portion goes to this and it has to go to your account anyway. But yeah, I mean, it's, if they want to, they keep saying in 10 years they want to be a top 5 league in the world and this and that. Well, then stop signing Matuidi. Stop signing Schweinsteiger. Stop signing these
Fat
players
Lampard.
because
Fat Lampard when he went over. I wish the league had kept him, to be honest. We didn't really want him back, the Mona. But
it's brutal.
It is, and I mean, it's an interesting one, because for a while that seemed to be just the MLS, but then suddenly China appeared, and the Chinese league, and suddenly having like Arnautovic and players like that going in, and I just love the brazen nature of the fact that the only reason you're playing in that league is because they're paying you £500,000 a week. Because in some ways it was the emperor's new clothes, just sort of like revealed.
100%.
Yeah, and I remember Czech Tiote when he went too. He even said, like, in the press, he's like, "Yeah, I need to take this payday for my family back home." And I thought, well done for being honest, but like,
Also,
I mean, what kind of league? Anyway, but yeah, that's what the MLS will be, unless they stop that. I mean,
I
in
do
Canada,
think of it, Stuart, abnormally though, like to your question, like why isn't China and why isn't India more of a power, you know? And I guess the States you could lump in there, and they've gotten to, I wouldn't call them a power, but it's such a, that actually fascinates me.
Well, actually, you know, on one of our podcasts, we spoke to a philosopher about the connections of football, but sport as a whole, and religion. And I think that actually we've replaced God is dead and football is alive in this country. And I think that it's our national religion, and it has all the hallmarks of religion. You know, the poor people queue up around the block at the weekend to go in and see who they pray to, and then they go home and they talk about it for the next 6 days, and then they go back. And they collect all the paraphernalia that surround it, and even the funny clothing and the rest of it. And I just don't think, I think as soon as China or America take it seriously, and I don't mean a scholarship, playing soccer and sitting at the back of, you know, a philosophy class possibly, and ignoring what's going on just to make your way through. As soon as they take it seriously, it becomes part of, you know, the fabric of their society. I think Europe is going to have a real tough time. But I don't think it'll ever happen. I'm not sure it'll ever happen. I think it's amazing that America has a baseball series called the World Series, and it's just America. I think that's incredible.
That's their arrogance.
Yeah, and then that's American football's the same. When you win the Super Bowl, you're the world champions, and everything's the world when it comes there. Can I ask you guys a quick question? I think we asked Anfield Wrap this question too, but like, I mean, Sai, you're a huge Leeds fan. Come the summer, are you switched on? Like, are you full out England? Like, and my, you know, even bigger question is like, would you rather Leeds win the Premier League or England win a World Cup?
Well, I'll let Sai answer that in a second. I'm a Scotland supporter. And so, yes, I am a miserable failure completely at the beginning of the summer, and I will stand and roar myself hoarse as we spectacularly fail with approximately about 17 minutes of decent football, which will end up with 3 losses and we'll be out. But I'll make some kind of weird claim that that we had the best left back in the tournament. And then I can't really answer for England at all because I feel completely uninvolved and disenfranchised from England. I can't really explain it, but would I rather Leeds won the Premiership than Scotland win the World Cup or the European Championships?
Well, one's a possibility and the other is...
Well, that's like, would you rather win £100 on the lottery or would you rather win £1 million? So I'd rather win the million and have Scotland win the World Cup.
Look at that. So yeah, because I mean, losing 1-0 to Liechtenstein is never good for like your country's. Anyway, I despise international football, and it's really interesting because I also really enjoy rugby as well. And one of the interesting things with rugby is the very, very elite of rugby is the Lions series, where the British and Irish Lions tour the All Black, South Africa, and actually, in terms of quality, physicality, technique, just that's the showcase, and that's actually the pinnacle of these guys' careers. Whereas actually in football, what I see is that the club game is far more advanced than the international game.
We'll come back to money again as well in that respect.
It is like Man City would give Spain a really good game, and sort of, you know, Real Madrid would give Germany a really good game, and whereas the Leicester Tigers rugby team would be beaten by plus 40 points by England or Scotland or, you know, or an international side. So, so for me, like, international football feels different. You can't take away the magic of a tournament. And so the tournament football for me still carries that sort of magic. And the World Cup where, you know, England finally won a game on penalties, that, you know, I was actually on a residential, I'm a teacher, I was on a residential with a bunch of sort of 11-year-olds. They were climbing ropes and things like that. We went and we watched the game, and I was just screaming that all over the place. It was incredible. Would I rather Leeds won the Premiership than England won the World Cup?
It doesn't feel like a fair question.
I can't answer it, and it's a get out clause, because when England are in that final, I would answer 100% of the time, I want England to win. When Leeds are 3 points away from securing the title, I'd be asking you who England are. I wouldn't have a nationality. I'd be a global citizen. And so like, I'm going to say it, and I'm going to go for it. I'd rather Leeds win the Premiership.
Ooh, look at him! Look at him! He's
I like how we sucked this out of him. That's all right. And here's I don't know if this is
there's something really magical about being a Scotland supporter. There's something incredible about being a Scotland supporter because a draw is like a 4-0 victory.
Yes.
And there's nothing that anyone could. I mean, I've cried at score draws, you know, and it's just incredible. And when Leeds were like at the very, very bottom of their kind of trajectory, it was depressing because it felt like you should have been somewhere else.
Yes.
Now we're kind of coming to the bit of where we should be. It's almost like the stock has risen to the point of like, okay, I'm comfortable, I'm happy, I'm safe now. Whenever 30 seconds before Scotland kick off, I look at 2 or 3 players. Now it's like McTominay, McBurney, and
Robertson.
And I think to myself, just have a good hour. Just have a good hour, right? Keep it solid. Make sure your passes find the people. And then when you get down the wing, please just don't hit the first man. And my standards are so low.
Yeah, there you go. Totally.
So low that we've made it to the Euros. We're going to be playing England. As far as I'm concerned, we've won already. We're winning already. That's
the parallel. That's the parallel with us. Canada, so we've only made the World Cup once in '86. Us getting to the tournament is the title.
Yeah,
that's it. And that's where international football to me is so magical, where like when San Marino get a 0-0, that's their trophy. That's their World Cup. And we're the same. Get us to the World Cup. That's our World Cup. And
let me add to Stuart, Mark. Let me add to Stuart, because I gotta, like, I feel the Scottish stuff. Like, my father's Scottish. Like, they are all from Glasgow, Maryhill. Like I said, they all look crooked teeth and stuff. They're gonna go to the World Cup. They're gonna beat England, or so the Euros, and they're going to lose to like Faroe Islands the next day. That's the thing with Scotland. like they fall off a cliff after doing the hard part, and you're
Yeah.
like, what is like, how does this keep happening? And I fall for it every tournament.
But the other thing as well is it's easy for, like, the thing is the Scottish put themselves up there to have the piss taken out of them, but people forget that there's 4.5 million people there, for Christ's sake. You know,
Exactly.
they've got a competitive team relatively. I mean, we watch Man City against, you know, Leeds United the weekend and go, look at these incredible players from all around the world that are collecting and showing their skill. And then we look at, even if it's Rangers against Celtic, we go, Christ, like that's mid-championship standard, like tops, to be honest.
Yeah.
It's 4.5 million people that live there, you know.
Yeah.
And Rangers not long ago kind of went bankrupt, went to the bottom of the league and cut, you know. And I'm the first person to take the piss out of Scottish football. I'm a Heart supporter, like, you know, once removed. My dad's from Edinburgh, but you know, they do all right. And I tell you what, if they beat England this summer, I'm gonna strip naked and run down the high street. I
Field run. You got your field run.
Yeah, and I'll be hugging him.
Yeah.
That's assault. That's classed as assault.
You know,
but the thing is, you know what's interesting
is willingly.
What's interesting about it is I see the England fans and I see them as like a pale version of a proper national fan. They're all backbiting. They all don't really like the team. They're all squabbling over the best players as opposed to just getting behind whoever. And you know, they have a bad 10 minutes in a match and everyone writes them off, turn the TV off and walk away and all of that. And you know, we will fail in the summer. Scotland will fail, but the whole country will be singing. And that's all that matters. You know?
I've noticed that with England, just talking to people on the podcast or just, you know, friends over here, is you see almost like the tiers of English football. It's like when you're in League One, League Two, you know, in the you know, that's where you see, like, you know, you see York. It's flags at the England games and all of because now they get to celebrate with these big players for once.
Well, because the rest of the teams in the Premiership don't have any English players.
Yeah, that's right. So I just find it's easy. I don't know. I'm just speaking for all the English people I don't know, but it seems like the you know, the lower leagues are more in tune with England because that's their chance at watching something big. I could be completely wrong.
Well, no, the thing is, what happens is, I think, you know, you like just an example is that you see like a homegrown player that comes from a lowly position. Either they've worked their way up through an individual club. Someone like, I'm going to talk about Leeds, but someone like Calvin Phillips, who was, you know, there's pictures on the website of him being 8 years old, like kicking the ball around for Leeds United all the way up. And even though Leeds are in the top league, you know, when Calvin makes it to the England thing, you'll see Leeds, you know, like the Morley, Leeds United, blah, blah, or Halifax, Leeds United, and you'll be at the England match with a big flag, the huge thing. But then you'll see other like Doncaster, or you'll see the Essex Whites or whatever, and they'll all get behind them. But, you know, apart from the embarrassment that is Sheffield United, the vast majority, and West Ham, to be fair, West Ham have got a lot of English players as well. The vast majority of the Premiership don't have many English players, so they don't have anyone to get behind. And a lot of these lower division teams, they support their players as they leave. And so even they go on to big things, they kind of like, they're happy of those players.
So I guess Jamie Vardy, for example, like he's like the quintessential like bloke done well. He I think is one of the best strikers. Well, he's one of the best strikers in the Premiership at the moment, but he's arguably, in terms of, he's a bit like Eddie Howe, but a player. Like Howe as a manager, English manager, you know, took a team from the very bottom all the way to the very top. I agree with you what you said earlier. It's like, well, how is he unemployed at the moment? Maybe he's waiting for Bielsa to retire. But anyway, but then look at Vardy. It's kind of, he evokes that sort of, I think there's also something existential about it, which is like, that could be me, or that could have been me.
And especially when you see him being interviewed and he mumbles and bumbles and goes, you know, I did all right. I got the ball and kicked it in the net. And you go, oh no, that could be me.
That could be me.
Yeah. Well, no, like, I mean, he's
like drinking pints of bitter and playing for like the Fox and Hound like 10 years ago, just on the weekends. And you know, what I love. I mean, it must be. I don't know whether you have it over here, but it's you'll see a I don't know how many pounds it is, or kilograms, whatever it is you use, but like a 25 stone bloke, you know, capital D, top off, and sweating just generally.
because the metabolism is dying, like rotting inside. And he'll just tattoos on his. The problem with Jamie Vardy is he's lost that spark of pace, hasn't he? He needs to run that a little bit more. And he's I'll be with him and I'll be like, yeah, you're right. And then I'll look and think, what's going on here? And I think there's an element of the self-loathing about England fans as well, because that guy's the same as me, that he could have made it too, like Jamie Vardy. It's just I got injured the day the scouts were there. What, injured like carrying your gut onto the pitch?
One of the jokes that kind of goes around when you play football, there's always one or two blokes in England, even if it's just like for a pub team, that go, I had trials at West Ham, didn't I?
Yeah,
you know, it's always like, oh yeah, no, Sunderland looked to me, but they weren't interested. You know, they're everywhere. They're everywhere. There is a legion of like would-be pros walking along with a fag on. Yeah. Christ.
Brilliant. Absolutely brilliant. You think a little bit like, this is to sound smart, but also to ask a legit question. And the Premiership is the total epitome of globalization, but for the World Cup, I feel like that's where it's lost its luster. Like when you go back and read about the old World Cups, and you know, you didn't know who the Brazilians were. Like you didn't actually quite literally know who they were till they showed up. You know, now we know them all, right? And like that romance in the game, you know, even the Dutch, like the soccer was so new, and the Dutch league was just becoming a power in Europe, that who are these guys? Like you don't get those surprises anymore. You know, I wish like for a new Hungary, or why hasn't Scotland got a Dennis Law and a Kenny Dalglish up front anymore? And like, I want a new team. I want an India or a Turkey or someone to play some style of football that just blows me away. That's new. And
what's interesting is we were talking to an ex-professional women's footballer just a couple of weeks ago on our podcast. She played for Leicester City women, and one of the things that we were talking about was actually like the difference in tactics that you see. And actually, I think you're right. There's an element of the mystery that's gone just because of the coverage that's out there. And like, you know, people weren't talking about Gengen pressing at all. But now everyone's talking about it. And whereas when you watch women's football in particular at the moment, you actually see, because of the differences in physicality, you see some really novel tactics being employed, and at times really strange formations, really strange patterns of play and things like that. Like it feels like in some ways the mystery has sort of gone that way. And you look at the She Believes Cup, you look at the Women's World Cup. So I mean, that's if the problem is the fans aren't flocking to those games. Not in the UK. You know, that's one of the things that Helen Busby, the ex pro, was talking about. She says it's growing, and that's good. It's in a better place than it's ever been, but you're not getting to the point where it's even close to parity.
And
I think a kind of a delusion of youth is that when you watch the World Cup when you're a kid, you were just naturally kind of like, I don't know who these people are, and you thought it's because of your youth, because you didn't know too much. When actually they were just people that played for provincial teams in those countries, and actually African football was a thing, and in a way Middle Eastern football was a thing. They didn't all try to, no one went for the silver bullet, did they? No one tried to kind of say, well, there's one way of playing and that's what we'll do. And in some ways, in England especially as well, is that there was a northern, a southern, a Midlands, even like a West Midlands and East Midlands way of playing football, which has completely died now as well. It's completely gone. And there's this kind of holy grail of like, if we can just get, if we can just to you know, the only real difference we have in this country, if I was to talk about the Premiership, are teams like, there's a whole host of teams that are trying to play similar football. You've got Man City, Wolves, Leeds United, all playing a similar kind of tactical game. And then you've got, and they've not done very well this year, but then you've got someone like Sheffield United, and a better version of Sheffield United, and a slight hybrid version is Leicester City, where it's sturdy at the back, look for the long ball, but with an element of skill. But now with what's happened to Sheffield United, you're going to find that teams are going to knocking that on the head, and everyone's going to try and do like a disgusting version of like this tiki-taka kind of, you know, high pressing, and then what happens is teams don't do it very well, and it looks really amateurish, and it looks and the quality of football is actually not that good at times. If you watch it, it's really quite poor. But I remember growing up and watching Leeds United was completely different from Newcastle. Newcastle was completely different from Manchester United, and then you had teams like Wimbledon and they played it maybe ugly, but you watched it and thought, oh, I quite like that. You know, that's all right. That like that, and it wins games and it had a character, but it's all starting to be a bit bleached a little bit. And Steve, I can't help but think that when you talk about the World Cup, like we were joking the other day that Wolves are basically Portugal, you know, and it's just the thing of like when Portugal turned up to, I've watched them every week. This you know, we know what it's about, and it's I don't know, it's a bit depressing actually that like we know the Brazilian, we know 3/4 of the Brazilian team. We know that Italy will be on the weak side. We know that France will be the dark horse. It's the same every single tournament, because we're aware of every single player in the world right now. And with this data stuff that's kind of floating around everywhere, you got bloody idiots sitting in their bedrooms looking at the Uruguayan third league, trying to figure out which 17-year-old is going to be the next big thing. So like, there's literally no surprises anymore at all in football. And that's why, have you seen across like football clubs are kind of like hiring these bedroom kind of analysts that are kind of like looking at data and, if I'm being honest, triangulating crap with crap and like selling it for money basically. And it's a complete nonsense. I don't really believe in that aspect of like, you know, an overweight, like, you know, bedridden, like 60-year-old English manager watching from the stands going, when I see it with my own eyes, I'll understand, type thing, you know. But there is data that needs to be used, but it's absolutely gone crazy at the minute.
The other way.
XG, bloody, you know, and when you look at a match and it says, oh, this team that lost 3-0 completed 68% of their passes in the second half, and the other team had 32%. It's like, yeah, but they didn't score as many goals as the other team. So
well, we had a coach like that here at Ottawa. Remember that, Steve? When actually Kenny Dalglish's son was a coach here at Ottawa Fury, and I think they lost like 7 or 8 games in a row. But after every game, he would go on Twitter and say, we had 19 successful crosses. We had 9 this, and he would specifically give about 7 stats that were wins, but they lost 4-0. And it was hopeless. And you're preaching to the choir with analytics and stats and all this ridiculous situation that's happening here. And like you said, there's non-football people now running football clubs. And that's where it's dying. And people like, you know, I don't want to say, I don't know offhand who's got the best eyes in the world, but you can't, I mean, going back to that whole philosophy of being British, you can't put in numbers somebody's desire, somebody's, you know, culture, somebody's the way, you know, somebody's fitness level, where you can, you know, and it's just garbage. And that's where it's killing. It's killing me. It's killing everything. And with the clubs and the cultures, and you sack one manager now. Okay, you want to have a culture in a club. You sack a manager, 17 backroom staff leave with him. Everybody leaves with him. And now you have to bring in an entire new football club. So it's like, how can you keep a culture if you sack 47 people at a time? It's like, and that's where I like something like a Southampton or a, you know, where it's like they have this design in the back room. They have their youth structure. They have this, that, and the other. And the manager, you plunk in, he does this thing, and you kind of, you know, it's like one piece in and out. I mean, they're not winning trophies, but at least you know how Southampton is.
And I think, you know, there's something we spoke about Bielsa, who's quite, you know, obviously fanatical about data. But one of the frustrating things about him as a Leeds fan is that he's like way too human. He's so emotional. He's in one minute he's detached, and another minute he has these loyalties with players, and he has this belief in players, which is almost, you know, like his projection. He's like their father, and he won't give up on them. And, you know, Stuart Dallas should not be a Premiership player. I don't care what anyone says. Brentford sold him because they didn't think he'd be good enough to have that push in the Championship to get to the Premiership. We took him, and he was our best player as we came up to the Premiership. And I would say he's been our best player this year so far. So, you know, you don't get those results. And I think about Leicester City as well. You know, on paper, nothing. And it required that bit of magic, bit of chemistry. And you know, it was really funny because I'm sure you've read plenty about it, heard plenty about it. But basically that team, I have a theory about footballers, is that basically, you know, Si and I both work in education, and they're basically just teenagers that need the slightest bit of motivation. And so Ranieri came out and he said when they won a football match, he would go and buy them a pizza.
Yeah.
These are people that are on £50,000 a week, but he would take them out as a group of teenagers and say, "I'll buy you a pizza," and they enjoy being part of a team. And
that's what that's what you do for me, Stu, isn't it? With the podcast, that's how you keep me bored. Every so often I start getting a bit maudlin and a bit like I want to do other things with my time. The pizza suddenly arrives, and what makes me smile is like I want to take you back in time a little bit to when Bolton were like one of the top clubs under Allardyce. Who I'm obsessed with Allardyce, but particularly Kevin.
Mostly because he shares his BMI, by the way.
That's outrageous. But like Kevin Davis was their striker, and like I think Kevin Davis is the epitome of like non-data led football, because everything about him suggested that he shouldn't be as successful as he was. But you ask any Arsenal fan, you ask any Manchester United fan in that era who they didn't want to be going up against, it was Kevin Davis. He was brutally effective. But I think in today's game, with the data-led sort of approach, I don't think he'd get a look in. And I think he'd be like the third or fourth choice striker. And I think maybe you're right, Stephen, in terms of like there's some like when you talk about like sort of the mystery has gone from the World Cup. There's something like I almost like I sometimes seek to be deceived as a football fan. Like we were talking to this statistical philosopher, and like I think I in a rare moment of honesty, I sort of was like I just like the 0.1% chance that we might be this team. And I think he had a dismissive response. He was like, "That's because you're the person they're selling stuff to," and sort of like just moved on. And I was like, "Oh, well, I am." And it was like, but actually, I think maybe you're right that actually, and maybe part of the loss for me in terms of for international football and the sort of the majesty that it used to have is the fact that actually these guys all play on the same team and I see them every single week. And actually this manager managed that club that was in the Premiership about 2 seasons ago, so I know that they're going to line up with a 3-4-2 as it goes. So like it's one of those difficulties, I guess, as we go forward, but it's also like a mark of its success, because the alternative is that we make football so provincial that actually we would lose what is effectively the jewel in the crown. Like the Premiership is something that, like, as somebody from the UK, like I shouldn't feel proud about, but like I kind of also am, that we've got like what most people would say is the best league in the world, when I don't know what they mean by that. It's the one that most TV money goes into, I think, because like other leagues are more exciting to watch. Like the Championship is more exciting to watch than the Premiership. But actually there's still an element of where it's like, it is, home of football, like all of that sort of stuff. But there's no stats to back that up. It's just that sort of that heart sort of response that you have.
Yeah, totally agreed.
Yeah, that's why Leeds are going to win the Premiership, and I totally believe that. And we've got a Championship side.
Yeah, is there that element where you are? Because where we are, it's like whenever you're talking to someone from England or from Europe in general, who do you support? We say who we support, and then we have to explain why. It's like there has to be a backstory to be like, this is why I swear I didn't just jump out. It's like you're constantly trying to prove yourself. So I kind of think to myself, in England, where you are now, do you have, like, where you live, most people have their own local team, right? In League Two or, in the, I don't know, the old conference, I don't know what it's called now, but it's like, so now, are you married to that local team? Do you go to those games as well and have a Premiership team? Like, are you doubling up here? Is that how it works?
I mean, the thing is, football is so deep in this country that the minutiae is at the end of my road, there is a ground where my local team play and 50 people come and watch every Sunday. And they're in the, what would you say, Si, the 15th, 16th tier of English football. But I could go a mile that way and see a team in the 10th tier, or I could go 4 miles that way and see a team in the top tier. And so we just have so many layers that you can pick and choose, or you can literally throw a stone and go in that direction.
So it was interesting, like, because I was fortunate to be born in Leeds. It's where God lives, It's what he created first. Some religion calls it Eden.
Yeah.
But but I was, I read this great article that this journalist who was married to a Leeds fan, she was describing what it means to be in Leeds, and she basically said, if you're from Leeds, you support Leeds. And she said if she can't imagine what it would be like if you were born in Leeds and supported Man United, but it would involve a public beheading by Lucas Radebe. And actually, she got it right. It's like, so where I was from, like, the local game is strong because people just want to play football in Leeds. But like Wetherby and like the clubs in and around that will always be really small because Leeds is as it is. I moved away from Leeds. I lived in a place called Kent, which is sort of south of London. And I sort of actually went the opposite way because I had my big club, even though, we've been in Division 1 and all of that sort of thing. I found Dover Athletic because I live just outside of Dover. And they were a club where, they'd have the family fun days where you'd get about 500 people along. But on the whole, mostly it was between 100 and 200, like hard-bitten nutcases would be there. Like just, the sorts of people that like shout at train stations, like by themselves. And you think, what's going on? Like, I'd be stood there with them. Like, I've adopted this club. And what was really interesting for me is like, and I don't know for you guys, like with like the clubs that you've maybe adopted in some ways over in Europe, like I began to feel this like strange affinity with Dover that came close to my feelings about Leeds because I'd almost like chosen them.
Yeah.
And there was something quite powerful about that. I think also about the fact that they were not successful. Like they at that time were in like quite a few tiers down. They've actually done relatively well since, but like, although it looks like they're going into administration now, but like it was one of those things that I was like, I think it was a reverse of what you're talking about there, because I think if you're not from Liverpool and you support Liverpool, you've got to kind of explain why. If you're not from Manchester and you support Man City, well, everyone knows what the answer is because of that. But if you're like, you know what I mean? Like, it's one of those things that you've got to explain why. And so for me, it's a bit of a reverse one.
There's a thing I call the commiseration point. There's where the teams are so unsuccessful that you don't have to explain yourself. And so once upon a time, like Leicester City used to be that team where, and now it's suspicious. If you support Leicester City, what's going on here? Leeds United, when they were playing, Bristol Rovers in League One, you'd say to somebody, I support Leeds United. They go, oh, yeah, sorry. Yeah, okay. And now you say I support Leeds United and they squint at you.
Yes.
Well, what's going on? Wait, what's happened?
They listen to your accent, don't they? Because like both you and I, we don't sound like, obviously like the regional accents. Like if you're from Leeds, you sound a bit like this, and it's really hard to understand what they're saying unless you're from that area. And so it's like, I'm from Leeds. Like my family are all still like hardcore Leeds, but like even then, I'd have to explain about that because it's like, again, like, did you go to a private school or something? Like, no, I've got a vocabulary, mate. But like that's that sort of explanation that you have to give. I mean, where did Liverpool come in terms of for you, Stephen?
For me, it was King Kenny. It was my family are all Celtic daft and just like brainwashed me with that. And when Kenny went there, that's when I was young, and so my childhood was all about Kenny Dalglish. So it's been Liverpool ever since. Funny enough, to what you've just described with Dover, the older I've gotten, the more I've been drawn to Partick Thistle, because my father and my grandfather, the only ones that aren't Celtic supporters, and they were Thistle supporters. And I have like this utmost respect. My father's passed away now, and it's something that I think, like, well done to you, like not to do it in Glasgow. And to go to Partick Thistle, and I go to their ground when I go back, and like I follow their results, and it's the commiseration point too, where they never won anything. And I talk about when they won the League Cup in '71, like I had anything to do with it or be there. Like I tell the stories my uncle said when he went, and I'm like, you weren't there. You're from Ottawa. Like, who are you? But I have that affinity for them, and the longer it's gone, it's like I almost want them to be the team I say is that's who I support. So that's where Liverpool came from for me, and I turned it into a totally different answer with Partick Thistle.
Mark, what about you? Have you got a club in the UK that you follow?
I've got see.
It's the worst story ever. And you know what?
It
Don't
is a bad
ever
story.
listen to
Well,
the podcast. He said it 3 times, and I every
we
time tell him.
we had this conversation. We explained on our podcast. But a long story short is I'm originally first and foremost a Rangers fan. My mom worked beside a Scottish lady who was cousins with Ali McCoy's, and they would get all the Betamax VHS tapes of every game. I would get like 7 VHSs a month, and I would watch that month of games in like the weekend. And that's just how it worked. And that's kind of where that came from. And then they weren't on TV. So then as I got older, I have Ukrainian heritage, and Kanchelskis was signed by Man United in 92, 93. And that was like, wow, a Ukrainian in the Premier. So then it was Man United shirts from my grand. And it's like, that's kind of how both of those are born. And now it's even worse because now I really have an affinity for both these two clubs. So when you ask that question, now I got to pick one, or I tell both stories, and they're both good. So it's both like, now I'm like, oh, it's like, come on. And now I'm like, it's like what you said. I get
Stuart,
the
you should have seen
guys.
the Leicester fans, though. The Leicester fans over here got lined up on a firing block at one point to say, like, there's no way you're in Ottawa and you're a Leicester supporter.
Yeah, well, that's
like,
what we said earlier,
people
Steve.
that were staring at them were like, because remember, there was the one guy coached at Fury, Steve Hill, and he's from there and he's been there. And this guy would walk down the street. I swear to God, I've always been, I'm from Leicester. He'd take out his passport. Like people were getting it here big time. And like kind of rightfully so in a way to say, really, Leicester?
Yeah.
Come on.
Yeah, Leicester actually is colloquially known over here as the armpit of the Midlands, which is hilarious. But and actually it's funny because Leicester's a rugby town. Leicester Tigers are like the Man United of rugby. So it's like it's hilarious. Like suddenly all these football fans suddenly appeared out of the blue. But I'm conscious of the time we've kept you guys.
No, not at all.
Talking for quite a while. Stuart, have you got any more questions? Anything more you want? Do you want to rant a little bit more about how statistics ruin the game? That felt like a loaded gun.
No, I don't. The thing is, the other thing as well is I don't always understand them. So what I try to do desperately is just pass off opinion as like solid gold. The thing is, it's interesting. I always like to tell the story of how me and Si kind of met, and how our eyes met over a fax machine at work. So effectively what happened was me and Si came for a job where I was working, and I think it was like his first week there. I didn't know him from Adam really, apart from the fact that I'd sat with him on the day he was there. And we were both standing at this printer, and it was like a scene out of The Office. It's just both silent, staring at it, and it's just churning out page after page. And he looked really pissed off. He looked really angry. And I thought, I know what I'll do is I'll go straight to the obvious. I said, "Oh, are you how you doing? You're right." He said, I'm just angry about the football." I said, "All right." And then I remember the night before Liverpool had lost, and I thought, "Oh shit, Liverpool supporter." and I said, "Oh right, okay, what is it?" And he just turned around to me. He looked at me and he said, "Yeah, it's just Leeds at the weekend." And we looked at each other, and I swear to God, it was like Romeo and Juliet. And our eyes met, and from that point onwards, we've been inseparable. And it was incredible. And the thing was, the reason I bring it up is because sometimes, we wander into psychology and how football works, and it's so strange. We didn't really know too much about each other at all, other than the fact we had this chain around our neck, which was Leeds United, that kind of made us stoop over, and had done for years. And we noticed each other's like terrible posture and where we've just been broken, and we just looked at each other. And from that point onwards, everything's been going well. And so, thankfully we're both married, so don't worry about that. But no, it's just interesting how it kind of football. And like I say, it's like one of the things that makes me a bit depressed about football in the 21st century is that the magic of that printer is kind of being lost a little bit with the over analysis. And I think lockdown has just absolutely killed it. I've got to the point now where actually I'm starting to turn football matches off about at half time sometimes. So I'm thinking to myself, there's too much football. I know too much about it. When you know as much about every other team as your own, it's just an unusual situation. And the analysis becomes pedantry, And we did a podcast. Last podcast we did was just about how awful punditry is at the minute, how dreadful it is. Really, really bad, really bad. And they've got people queuing around the block on our TV channels, mostly ex-players that can barely understand, what's on the back of a can, let alone we know what's happening in a football match. And they're just trotting out nonsense over and over again, and it's just driven us to distraction. And we're coming out of lockdown soon, so I think even for you guys, like being far away, you'll start to see our stadiums bouncing, and everything will be that much more interesting. And just before we go, I do want to talk just for 5 minutes about VAR.
Oh my god, it's like a swear word.
Let's just do a very quick fire. Like, tell me what you're thinking. Tell me, do you think it's going to exist? My personal feeling is that when we get fans back in the stadium, there'll be almost like a mob democracy where people will start to say, "I'm not witnessing this every week." It's not.
I agree, and that's how it is. I think I texted Steve about it the other day, or another buddy. It's like now when you score, there's zero reaction for at least a minute and a half until the kickoff. So you can't even get upset. It's like, for me, the fist pump happens when the kickoff happens. I'm like, okay, they can't go back now, right? And then I look around, I'm asking my kid, he's 8. I'm like, they can't go back, right? I don't know. I don't know what's happening.
Interesting is, I am addicted to gambling, right? And so on my mobile phone, when I'm putting my bets on, the only way I know a goal is actually scored is when they're paying out money. And so they do that before even the referee announces it. So I'm looking at my app at William Hill, whatever, and it's going, okay, right, if I cash out now, I've got 40 quid or whatever. And they're not even announced it yet on the TV. And so in some way, shape or form, they're just that one step ahead. And I think to myself, right, something's gone wrong here. Right, something's gone really wrong.
We actually swore in our podcast, we weren't going to talk about it. We're like, nah, don't do that. Don't be those guys. And I'm going to say, this is a bit like suck up to you guys maybe, but when the Bamford one, when he was pointing for the through ball and they called him offside, and I just thought, it's brilliant. He's communicating. He's like, that's so well. And now he's offside. That's when I snapped and I came on the show and I ranted for half an hour, and it was the lowest rated show we've ever had ever. But I had to get it out. Like, what is this?
Is there any part of it that you think is useful? Because the thing is, the other thing about VAR is that, as Sai said already, like we've been watching rugby for 25 years, the pair of us, and for video, it's so intrinsically a part of like what makes rugby even exciting. Someone goes over the line, it's such a melee, it's such a mash that you're kind of looking for a bit of clarity. The thing about football is dead simple. Like it's really, really simple.
I do love the way rugby does it. Then there's been a lot of examples floating around on the web lately when all these decisions, why can't you just do it like this and explain it? I can't answer why they don't. I think that's genius. I have to say, I'm coming across as like this big American, but like the American football, their replay doesn't distract from the game when I watch. Like, it's a quick, it's done. It's just more efficient. Maybe VAR's not there yet. Maybe we just have to go through growing pains. But I feel like I think there's something gone wrong there.
It feels like it's getting worse. That's what I feel like. There's just no clarity on anything.
Is it a failure of the rules though? Like, so I come from the perspective that VAR itself is
because we had VAR before, didn't we? And it worked really well.
VAR is neutral. I think it's a failure of the rules. The VAR is going to flag that arm is offside. If your rule is saying that the arm is offside, it's the rule that's at fault, not VAR. And so for me, I think practically, I think you're right. I think there's things that they can do that a bit like the cricket, a bit like the rugby, a bit like the American football, get it up, get it sorted, move on. Yeah. But actually, I think we've got a real crisis with the rules. Strangely enough, Arsene Wenger has come out with some quite interesting ideas. Yeah. And I think he's probably got the way forward because, again, like philosophically, I won't go into it, but it's something that it's like something can be right but feel wrong, and something can be wrong but feels right. And that thing that's wrong in terms of he's offside, but he doesn't feel like he's offside, and so let's just carry on playing. I think Stu's probably right. When you've got 35,000 Yorkshiremen in Elland Road saying, maybe you don't want to check VAR, single man in the middle of this pitch.
Well, we'll see a variability in the checking, because the thing is, what's interesting about VAR is that there's layers of decision making. So it's, I think that person's offside, shall I check it? It's not always automatic, and sometimes you're watching a match and it's like they've not even checked something and you think that was a blatant penalty. But they've not even checked it. And then something will happen in a flash and everyone will be getting on with the game, and then you're like, they're checking for something.
Yeah.
Well, what are they checking for?
Yeah.
Someone kicked the ball at 45 miles an hour at someone's arm and they're giving a penalty, and it's
Exactly.
just unusual. For me, it's like, who makes the call on the check? And I think, to be honest with you, I think they should scrap it for offside. And let's live like we did for the best part of 100 years with every now and then someone being offside and scoring a goal.
Yeah, it's part of it. It's just part
evens
of it.
itself out.
When they get that red line to go against the green, like I lose it. I leave the room. I go get a beer or I go get a snack. That's time to like.
I feel like it's too much. It's almost it goes back to the data for me. Now the computers are happening and arrows and I'm like, you know what, you've lost me. I'm done. Yeah.
But it's also it's stuff like someone's like a quarter of an inch of someone's knee is offside, and you just think to yourself, yeah, like what Si was just saying, yeah, I guess it is.
You know what? I'm not going to hear a bad word against VAR, because if VAR had been in place, the hand of God wouldn't have happened, and we'd won. So parochially, jingoistically, VAR brilliant.
As someone who can say it without getting lynched down the street, though, isn't it a bit part of the fabric of the game and the romance of like what he's done, and that he's a scoundrel and he scored that goal and then he scored the most beautiful thing you've ever seen a minute later? Like, isn't that in some small way, even English, isn't that juxtaposition of what he did in that game fascinating to you? No.
Stu, do you want to wrap up?
Yeah, let's just.
Nice
talking to you guys. I hope this gets released someday.
As a Scottish supporter,
VAR says you're offside, Steve. Yeah, VAR indicates Steve is highly offside.
I went too far. This has happened to me before.
Well, listen, guys, it's been an absolute pleasure, and I tell you what, we're going to have to do this again because I absolutely enjoy myself. It's been fantastic to listen to you guys.
This is.
Would you like it if perhaps in I don't know how many games time, 10 games time, we get together and talk about the end of the season?
Yeah, why don't we have you on ours? And
brilliant.
You know, maybe you can tap into our 3 listeners, and maybe that'll help you out a little bit.
You can add to our 2.
Okay.
Yeah, Stuart and I regularly listen to our own podcast, so that's 2 at least.
I said 3 because Mark puts it on his. He has 2 devices he uses. So
gotta get our stats up. Get your kid's phone. Get everybody's phone in the house going. Put it on. We were 890th in Faroe Islands one week. It was fantastic.
I tell you something for nothing. Our podcast was the most listened to footballing podcast in, I think it was southern Thailand one week.
Wow.
Which I think those 47 football fans in South Thailand were really living it up on that beach. So
we next show we do is about the Taiwanese national team. We're going to talk all about them.
Yeah.
Fantastic.
It was one show. Amazing. It was one show, and then they didn't listen again, so they were distinctly underwhelmed. And I think,
I remember, I'm going to bring the tone down a little bit. I remember I did a decent glutful of cock jokes as well, that one. So they can't have got that too much. Thanks very much for talking to us. It's been great. I'll be back in touch with you in a couple of months' time, and we'll do a bit of a roundup of the season. That'd be cool.
Yeah, that'd be brilliant. I think that's fantastic.
Nice one, guys. Thanks very much.
Cheers.
Take care of yourself.
Thanks,
lads.